Greetings, everyone. Tim Anderson here, aka Renville. Excuse me. I am under the weather, so I apologize if my voice is extremely gravelly and I am stuffy, but it is what it is. I wanted to get around to reviewing the first of the trilogy of novels included in the omnibus edition of Robert Jordan's The Conan Chronicles, Volume 1. The first book being Conan the Invincible, as part of the November Sword and Sorcery month that I am participating in. Is this a buddy read? I don't know how you I don't know enough about this stuff, but I know Liam over at Liam's Lyceum um, had asked for folks to follow along for Sword and Sorcery in November, and I said, yeah, I've got time, and I want to read Conan novels because I never have done so before. Even never read any of Howard's work either. So this was my first entry into the novelized format of this character, even though I've seen screen adaptations and loved all of them. I know quite a bit about this character because of its place in kind of nerd history, so to speak, but I've never read a book um, on this character. But I'm familiar with Sword and Sorcery. I've read a lot of Sword and Sorcery over the year. Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, the Sword and it's more of the Sword and Planet stuff. But like I love the John Carter of Mars books. And so I'm familiar with the genre, and I wanted to give this a chance. Plus, I love Robert Jordan as a writer for his Wheel of Time series, which ranks up there in my like top 5 fantasy series of all time. So to say I was expecting a lot when I went into this would be an understatement. I was expecting quite a bit, and when I got done, I definitely felt let down, despite the fact that this is a fairly entertaining read and it's a good book overall. So let's dive in and talk about that. But before we do, if this is your first time here, do me a favor. Go ahead and give the like button, a smash so that you let me know that you like the video and helps out with the algorithm. And of course, don't forget to follow along the channel, subscribe here, hit the bell icon so you get updates for future content because I do a lot more other than just book reviews here. And let me know in the comments below if you've read this book or if you are familiar with Conan overall. All right, let's dive back in here to this. So, this is an interesting take on things because, as we all know, Robert Jordan is not the creator of the Conan character or the world or the setting or any of that. So, much like many other authors, Jordan was working with someone else's universe here, and it shows because all of Jordan's sort of in my mind, trademark world building skills, which went into play with the Wheel of Time, are not evident here. He doesn't have the leg room to work with that sort of excessive detail, and so we're left with what I think I haven't been able to find an exact word count online, but I've read between 70 and 75,000 words is the length of this novel. It's a fairly quick read, depending on your skill level, your speed level, but it's not a 300,000 word Wheel of Time novel. This is would be like a the prologue to one of his books. Um, so, um, knowing that going into this, you're immediately faced with the fact that this is not his own character. So he's working within parameters that have been set by uh, the sort of tone of the original Conan and the setting and everything else. So some of the flaws that I'm going to discuss in this book aren't necessarily Jordan's fault. It's just the flaw of Conan as a character. But I still think that there could have been theoretically ways to perhaps work around that. I'm not sure. It depends on the publisher at that, at some point. But overall, this is a fun read, but we are dealing with Conan at a much earlier stage of his life. Conan is 19 years old in this book. And despite the fact that he's only 19, he's had quite a few adventures already. Defeated some sorcerers, lost his soul, got it back. Like, he's done some shit and seen some shit despite only being 19 years old, which somewhat makes sense given the fact that this is in a setting where men probably didn't live much beyond 40, 50 years old. Um, but if you look at Robert E. Howard's Conan, he wrote Conan over large swaths of time. So we have Conan as a kid, Conan as an adult, Conan as an old man. But this is very much when Conan is a young whippersnapper, um, and as such, I feel like that was one of the areas where I personally didn't care for the portrayal of the character because Jordan sometimes wrote Conan as a 19-year-old and sometimes wrote Conan as a more mature man with much more experience. And it's not to say that the 19-year-old Conan didn't have a lot of experience, but a 19-year-old doesn't have the same worldview. And I could be projecting myself onto this at some point because if you're looking at the 19-year-olds in this world would have a lot more world experience than the 19-year-olds of our world, regardless of setting. But there was some interesting moments in this book where I kind of felt myself going, okay, and that seems like something that would be a much wiser older person making that decision, but I'll just roll with it. Again, this is a fun read. It's a good story. Classical sword and sorcery take on you have a sorcerer who, has got this monster under his control and he has, he can't be killed because of magic. And there's some tropes in here, which we're familiar with from Sword and Sorcery. The other element of Sword and Sorcery, and I think this might even be more to the Conan side of things as well, but um, there's lots of, you know, sort of the classical element of when you're describing the necromancer's surroundings. It's there's books bound in the skin of virgins. There's candles made out of, human flesh and bits of this and that. And there's just sort of all this is kind of thrown out there to make it very clear that the necromancers are really bad dudes who are willing to do anything to get their power. And on the flip side of that, you also have the classic sword and sorcery element of all the women are sex objects, even if they are powerful figures like Corella the Red Hawk, who is both a badass warrior at the same time as being this lusty, voluptuous, woman who sees young 19-year-old Conan as her moment to be a cougar with a hot-blooded big ass muscled dude, ravaging her in bed. And so there's that element going on as well. And sort of, Conan being portrayed as the at this point in his life, um, he's just a young thief and he doesn't think beyond tomorrow. It's mostly just about do I have enough coin to eat, sleep, and fuck. That's literally he literally even says that like in the earlier parts of the book. Like he's just that's what his money is for. And as long as he has those things, he is content in life. So, um, accepting that these are all sword and sorcery elements, those are all here. The story moves very quickly from point A to point B. Um, Overall, fun read, but there are some things that I didn't care for particularly. I'm going to talk about those right now, and they're going to be some of these are going to be a little spoilery, so fair warning to those of you who are reading along or watching along, listening along. Yeah, I have a cold. I'm allowed to be confused. Um, so one of the first things I noticed was there was like random, and I'm not going to point out any examples here, but if you read this, a lot of the prose is very easy to read, and it's descriptive without being overly descriptive, and it flows very nicely. But it's like every 10 or 15 pages, I feel like there would just be a random big ass adjective thrown in here out of nowhere, and it made me feel like Jordan was literally just opening up to the thesaurus and the thesaurus, however you want to pronounce it, and like looking for a word to replace the generic word so that he would have some more grammatical variety throughout the book. Because there were words where I came across probably 20, 25 words in this book where I was like, what the hell does that even mean? And I gotta like stop reading and go look it up because I'm like, I've never heard of that word ever in my life. and it took me out of the book on multiple occasions because when I had to stop the book to go look something up, I'm like, I just felt like that was, I don't know if that was done on purpose or if that was done, as a way to use antiquated words for things to help put the book in a setting appropriate to the times. Because these are very much words that I've never seen, having read Wheel of Time. Not once reading Wheel of Time did I ever have to stop and say, "What's this word mean?" Because he used regular, English that everyone is familiar with. So that was weird, and it was something that, from a personal standpoint, I kind of went, "Why couldn't you have just said a dark night instead of saying?" I'm using this. This is not a word that he used, but saying like a Stygian night, but using big words. I don't know. It took me out of it. The the objectification of women is not a big deal in my mind for the sword and sorcery genre because that's just part of the genre. Obviously, it's going to be problematic in the current age we live in with certain readers because, it's objectifying women. But you also have to understand that that's from a perspective of when these books are supposed to be set. It's a given that at that point in time, women were treated that way. Um, Conan also seems to have some level of um, I wouldn't necessarily say respect for Corella as a warrior, but he definitely objectifies all the women he comes in contact with throughout this whole book. Like, just like every woman he meets is an object to be to use for his own gratification. And I have to admit that the scene when he it's not rape, but it's borderline. Like, he tells Corella, after he's rescued her, and he lays her down and takes her. He literally says, you have no other way to pay me. I'm taking my payment now. This is the payment that I expect for rescuing you." And she protests, and he says to her, "You can say no, and I will let you go, and you could be on your way. But if you don't say no, this is you've promised me payment. I'm going to take this as my payment." And so he does, and it talks about how, she doesn't say no, but she's definitely protesting and hitting him, and until eventually become those blows weaken, and she gets into it, and she finally enjoys it by the end of it. That scene, regardless of whether or not we're talking about reading this in the Me Too times or not, that scene was so problematic for me for multiple ways because I looked at this and I went, I just, I don't know. It's a personal thing. I did not care for that scene. It lessened Conan as a character to me. And I don't know why, because we all know that Conan is a big, beefy guy and he loves women and he wants to, literally, he just wants to eat, kill, drink, and fuck. Like, that's Conan. Um, but that scene in particular in this book really it just threw a wrench in my whole thing. I was like, what? Did that just really happen? Like, ah. Um, that aside, the rest of it is sort of to be expected of a sword and sorcery novel. Um, but going through this, that was something that stuck with me throughout. And getting towards the end of the book, I do kind of like the revenge that he takes on Corella at the end of the book, where he's like, you treated me like this throughout this whole series of events. So I'm just gonna, let you deal with your issues. Good luck out there. You made me swear an oath, and these are the boundaries that you set. So we have to deal with that. Um, I would say that overall, I think this was a pretty good entry in my mind into the Conan series. From what I've heard other people talking about, they all think that it's a good first entry for Conan for Jordan writing with the Conan novel. Um, and he went on to write, six other books in this series within a very short period of time. They did two books in 82, two books in 83, and three books, right? Seven in total, two, four. Yeah, three books in 1984, including the novelization of the second Conan movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And overall, he obviously worked with this book, and Robert Jordan publicly said that these books were great writing practice for him because he was able to work with someone else's universe, someone else's characters, and he had to adhere to sort of a strict guideline of how to deal that, and he was able to then just crank these out. And from a writing exercise standpoint, he made a paycheck and got some valuable skills out of working with these characters. Again, overall, it was a good sword and sorcery novel. I don't know enough about the other Conan books to be able to place this in the ranking. I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads because there were some problematic prose issues and some things that I felt were a little over the top. But overall, it is a fun read, and I think it's worth your time. So let me know in the comments below what you think, if you've read this or not. If you plan on reading it, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to get more updates on future content, and of course, follow us along on Discord if you want. All those links are down there. And stay tuned because I will be doing the other 2 books in this omnibus edition over the course of November as I finish the Sword and Sorcery month with Liam over at Liam's Lyceum, and the links to his channel are down below as well. Thanks, everybody. Until next time.